Today we are live with Sharmon Lebby of the Ethical Network. I am Kirsten Thompson. I am your host of More Than Magic. We are an experimental podcast here in San Antonio, Texas, in the heart of the East Side / downtown VodPod Media. Please, before we get started, take a moment to like this video, share it, because you're in store for a treat. So today's guest is Sharmon.
Yes.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. When you said yes, I was like, yeah, she's coming. I haven't seen you in years. We were just talking about it's been a while. So there is a tradition that I have decided that's going to be just part of our show going forward. And, you know, we have really colorful names. We have different names. They're distinct. They're unique. And your name is one of those names that I'm sure people butcher. I'm sure they mess it up.
All the time.
I'm sure you get called other things. So please tell us your name, the proper pronunciation, and where did it come from? Like, is there significance to your name? Is there a story? We want to know. Give us the goods.
Yeah. So it's Sharmon Lebby. My full name is Sharmon Adriana Lebby. I am probably like the only person in the world, I feel like, with a unique name that absolutely loves it.
Yes.
Like, I have always absolutely loved my name. But I feel like where it came from is like a point of contention in the family. Like, nobody really knows. Nobody can remember.
Oh.
Like, I'm 41 years old and now they're like, who knows? But the thing that people do remember is that my aunt named me. Mm-hmm. What they can't remember or can't seem to agree on is whether or not she made it up or if it was one of my uncle's girlfriend's names.
Ooh.
Right?
You see. Where's the girlfriend?
I don't know. But like, if you Google Sharmon, there is actually there's probably like 2 or 3 more out there in the world. And so I did follow one on Instagram because I'm like, we got the same name. I don't know if we pronounce it the same, but we got the same name. So I'm gonna follow you. So yeah, I have no idea. And it's funny because I was in Korea teaching for, I think I was there for 15 months. And there's a lot of Nigerian refugees there.
Yes.
One of the guys told me, he's like, are you Nigerian? He's like, your name is Nigerian. And I was like, no.
Oh.
But then it was funny because I met someone here. She was Nigerian. She was like, no, I'm Nigerian. It's not Nigerian.
He told you wrong.
So I was like, I don't know what he was trying to do.
He was like, you're cute. I'm going to make you Nigerian.
So yeah, I have no idea where my name came from. But yeah, like the variations and people,
I'm sure you get Sharon.
Trying to pronounce it is all over. I have Shannon on my medical records, and I'm like, I need y'all to get this together.
That's a problem, yes.
Because y'all know,
Yeah, but it is Sharmon, not Sharmon.
Yes,
Sharmon.
it's Sharmon.
Okay.
Although Sharmon Sharmon was never a nickname. They nicknamed me TP.
Because it
sound like Sharmon.
No.
But Sharmon is usually a pretty common pronunciation that people do. So yeah.
Well, Sharmon, we are glad to have you here. It's funny you said the thing about finding another person with your name and following them. We had a guest, Kirsten Yin, and the way we became connected is because we were in like a group together, and I'm like, a black girl named Kirsten. I was like, how do you pronounce it? Do you pronounce it Kirsten or Kirsten? And she's like, Kirsten, the right way. I'm like, I'm sending you a friend request. Hey. So I can absolutely identify with that whole thing. It's exciting to find someone with your name, especially if they look like you. It's kind of cool.
Because, I had to go for the people because I can never find it on like stuff, right? I'm never going to have a Coke can. Right. With Sharmon on it.
Right. No, it's true. It's so true. Well, I'm glad that, whoever decided to name you that, I'm losing my earring, which I'm only wearing one. I'm glad whoever decided to give you that name gave it to you because it's distinctive and you're distinctive.
Thank you.
So you're very interesting. So you have founded the Ethical Network of San Antonio, but even though I really want to talk to you about that because we have that commonality being in fashion, you are an academic.
Yeah.
And I think those are 2 worlds that people do not see intersecting. They believe either you have brains or you think about fashion and beauty.
Right.
And it's possible to beautifully coexist, and it does, right here in front of us. So before we start talking about fashion stuff, what is your can we just say like day job or yeah.
So tell us I'm like it's the job that pays for everything else.
Right. So give us the deets, because I find this fascinating.
Yeah, so I'm a neuroscience research associate at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and I work in what they consider a neurophysiology lab. So looking at the physiological aspects of neurons within your brain. We look at a very particular part of the brain called the basal ganglia, which deals a lot with like motor things. So like when I first moved there or just got to this lab, we were studying a little more closer to like Parkinson's related things. We've moved away from that a little bit now, but he is very focused on building like computer models of networks and how the cells and the neurons interact with each other and what happens when they're in sync and what happens when they're out of sync and how do you fix that. And they're still in a very Parkinson related in that sense. But it's been fascinating. I love it. I've been, doing science for well over 20 years. And it's a really interesting joy because I am very connected to the arts and the creative side of things. But there is a creative side and an artistic realm within science as well.
Yes.
Because I do a lot of immunohistochemistry, which is basically just staining cells and tissues and then getting to image those. So I'm like, that photographer in me gets to come out, when imaging like these little tissues and seeing what different cells look like and the anatomy of those. And I love it.
No, that's fascinating. And I really like that I think every show that we've had thus far, we've kind of alluded to the right brain, left brain dichotomy and how societally we're thought to exist on one end of the spectrum or another. Yeah. And also there's this idea that's a complete fallacy that those worlds don't join or they don't mesh well. So if you're a scientist, you're a scientist, and there's no art. There is art in science.
There is, absolutely.
There is science in art. So it's really cool that you are like a living manifestation of all of that. How did you get into that field? Like, what prompted you? Were you like a little girl? Like, okay, yeah. I saw your face light up. You're like, yes.
So this is really interesting because my mom is one of those like social worker type. She is a social worker. She's not a social worker type.
Yeah. She's the archetype.
Yeah, she is. And so she is very much about those personality tests and all those things.
Yes.
And I remember I was an orange, which is like just that fun, creative, wild side. Orange was my first. And then I would go back and forth between the blue and the green, which is like super compassionate and then super analytical. And it would just kind of depend on my mood as to which one was second for me. But she always thought I was more analytical because I had so much of my dad in me and so much of that science and that math, that aptitude for those, that area.
Right.
But I was always, it's weird that she just like focused in on that and just thought that's where I was going to go. Because I was very interested in those things. Like, they would have us reading the encyclopedia over summers and writing reports. But I would get so into like reading about these animals and all those things. And I think so. That's where she just always thought I would land.
Right.
And so when I was more into the creative and the arts and the singing and the drawing, she's like, wait, what's happening here, right? Kind of thinking that you can't have one without the other. But I think what ultimately kind of pushed me into the sciences, I think as a career mode, was I was in the 9th grade, and I was in a science class. And I had a teacher, and I wish I could remember his name. I'm so bad with names. I just remember this man was really tall, and he looked like Abraham Lincoln.
Very memorable.
Yeah, he was just like very encouraging. I think he was the first teacher. I grew up in very white schools. My dad was in the Air Force, and I was always like one of two. So he was like the first teacher that was just really encouraging and open, and he was my science teacher.
Wow.
And like he encouraged me to like take the AP bio test, even though I hadn't taken AP biology, and he like schooled me and just did all these things, and I was just like, science, like this man just kind of like opened my world and my eyes, and like from then on I was like, science is gonna be my thing. And so that's just how I ended up that, you know, in that field as a career, just from this guy that actually took an interest in me. And it was the first time in the 9th grade. You know, I had to get to the 9th grade before a teacher was like, you're pretty awesome. Let's build on that.
But it's interesting that it took you until 9th grade for someone to pour into you that way. Mm-hmm. And I do believe that in our communities that happens because there's so many brilliant, gifted young girls and boys. Yeah. But sometimes that brilliance is like they're a little too feisty. Yeah. They ask too many questions. They are too talkative. There's all of these labels that are like hoist up on young children in our communities, and that brilliance isn't allowed to shine through. So you were really fortunate to have someone that actually saw you, and said, okay, I see something and it's special and I'm going to pour into her.
And it's interesting because I really think back into my career, and I still think he's the only one. Just that one teacher. Just the one.
Wow. 1 in 12 years of schooling.
And I think a lot of people recognize that I was smart and intelligent. I was in like gifted and talented programs, but everybody was like, okay, she has this. We'll just, you know, stick her into this classroom or move her up here into this extra little reading level. Right. But nobody had actually like poured into me and invested in me and my education. And I was just like, I like you, and this is how we're going to honor you.
Yeah. So, no, it can make a world of difference. It really can. That's dope. Okay. So you know that you want to work you have an interest in science. Mm-hmm. You kind of made up your mind. At what point did you say, I'm artistic enough to create at a level where I'm putting something out into the world? Mm-hmm. Not that I'm just like at my house in my room doing something. I'm going to start creating so that other people can, because you have, I know that you have a line, and I believe your Blessed Designs, you're still pretty, yes.
It's still,
Yes. So you do, well, tell us about your company, Blessed Designs.
Yeah. So it is a line of like statement tees, really, made of hemp and bamboo, you know, screen printed with water-based inks. It's an ethical, sustainable fashion line that was a huge part of mine. I call them not so basic tees because they're very specially designed. This is not one.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Never mind.
It's not one. I'm sorry. But my outfit is very sustainable, y'all.
Yes.
I'm very much.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about that.
So, but so I got started in that, I guess about like 5 years ago, but that was like one in a long line of, you know, creative businesses that I kind of had. And I think they were hobbies that I kind of like put a little entrepreneurial spin on.
Right.
Just because I guess I just wanted to do something. People would be like, you should get paid for this. And I'm like, I should, but I'm also realizing it takes the fun out of it though.
It can.
So I'm like,
It's funny you said that because there's an idea that we do kind of have to commodify everything. Yes. And there's something really beautiful and sacred about, yes, we have bills. Yeah. We need to pay bills, right? But also keeping something for yourself and keeping it kind of sacred and keeping it, you know, as like a therapy, as a therapeutic modality to lift your spirits. And it's like, you don't want to share everything with everyone. But when you know you have a gift, it's like, well, I also kind of have a responsibility to share some of it. So, you know, how do you decide like what to keep for Sharmon and what to like, you know, push out like a baby into the world and like, okay, gaze upon this, you know, this creation. How did you?
I think that's a balance I'm still working on actually. 'Cause right now I follow Jordan Manny. I don't know. Do you know Jordan?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, she's so amazing.
Yeah. She's
hey,
incredible.
Jordan.
Hi, Jordan. We love you.
Yes. So I was listening to her on a podcast that she was on, and she was talking about like different types of rest.
Woo.
And one of them was creative rest. And I was like, you know what? I get so much energy from creating, and then having to then create a business or commodify that drains it all out of me.
It's almost counterintuitive.
It is.
Or counterproductive.
So I just started like watching these little YouTube videos and like just drawing and not really even thinking about it, just copying like whatever they were doing.
Right.
And I'm like, that brought me so much rest and so much peace, like at the end of the day, as I'm just like trying to wind down. And so those things, like some things I've shared out with the world, but for the most part, I'm like, those are just mine because it's literally like my therapy.
Yes.
That's my therapy time. That's just me winding down from the day, trying to just recollect and wind down. And yeah.
Well, and especially because of your career field, mental energy is intense when you're having to I think that there's an idea that sometimes people who are very smart and using their brain are not doing work. It's like, oh, they're just naturally smart, and so this comes easy to you. But it's really like anything else. It is, you may not see the physical energy moving things from point A to point B, but using your brain's power to make things manifest, to figure out solutions to problems, that is work. And you do go home exhausted.
It is. I come home exhausted from a long time. And I will literally have just like sat in front of the computer and worked out like mixing solutions or working out like the concentration of things. And maybe that's all I did that day, was just trying to figure out how much of what was going to go into this little solution. And it's like, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done.
You're like, my brain and my body need to go lay down.
Yeah.
We're all going to go lay down. Yeah. So you have is it Blessed Designs or Blessed Design Co.?
It's Blessed Designs.
Okay.
But it's,
I think I've seen both.
Yeah. I have the Co. on there mostly because when I was trying to get my website, it was already taken.
Yeah.
So we have the Co.
Those poachers that.
Yes. So when, since that was the website,
Gotcha.
I added it to all my socials so that it like continuity,
Yeah, because, of course, before you came, I'm like, let me make sure. And I'm like, I see both and I don't want to misname, but that makes sense that you would need that appendage to kind of, okay. So when did you decide? So you founded the Ethical Network. And
so I guess I'm technically a founding member. Yeah.
Okay. Because there's 3.
There was 5 of us.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we talk about that effort, please educate our audience. What is ethical? I mean, I know the answer, but I would like to hear it from your mouth.
Yeah.
What your understanding of ethical fashion is, what sustainable fashion is, and why it's important in this modern world that we live in.
Woo.
Buckle up.
Y'all ready?
Okay.
So for me, ethical fashion is, I almost want to say like an appendage of sustainable fashion, and it's bringing sustainable fashion, I think, back to where it originally was meant to be. Sustainable fashion for so long has been focused on the environmental impact of fashion,
right?
Where, as far as like microplastics within our clothing, the dyes and the toxins within that, and how it's polluting waterways and getting in air, and, cotton, all the pesticides associated with that. So sustainable fashion for the most part had always focused mainly on the environmental stuff. Ethical fashion came kind of back in 2013 after the Rana Plaza disaster, where like a building collapsed and over 1,100 people were killed. Yeah. And so they kind of brought back this idea that, it's more than just about the environment. It's about, people and their work and their labor being properly compensated for. And, I'm like, yeah. So I'm like, I think it's important mostly because I feel like, if COVID taught us nothing, it taught us that we are so interconnected. And what happens in one part of the world absolutely affects what, happens here. Like, I mean, even our supply chain right now, right? And so all of these people that are completely being underpaid just by virtue of, well, I'm going to say it, just colonialism and
speak on it,
and racism,
speak on it. Yes.
Just because they live in a certain part of the world, all of a sudden their labor is worth less, and
far less,
far less.
Yes,
and it's crazy that we treat people that way. It's crazy that we don't think about the human cost to our clothing as we justify our need or our right to certain things. And I think it's important, especially as people who, I could think, I guess in like the Western world, I don't want to say like developed because
right, that's a loaded term.
Right, yeah. The global North, as we're like saying it. We have a lot of privileges, and we have a lot of things that we feel are rights, and they're really privileges.
Right. It's an entitlement.
It is. We definitely have an entitlement that we are owed or should have certain things without recognizing that those things are affecting people in other parts of the world. Yeah. And especially as, you know, the feminist and womanist culture comes up, and I'm like, look, these are people of color that are being affected because you want, you know,
disproportionately so. It's almost to the point of being exclusively so.
I would say.
Yeah.
I would say exclusively so. Because sure, like absolutely in this country we are affected by climate change, and people of color, especially here, are affected more. So many like marginalized communities just get the brunt of this, and it sucks. But yes, especially in the global South, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just,
it's an atrocity.
It is, absolutely.
Yeah. I was sharing with someone recently that just in my like styling work, I make a conscious decision no matter what type of project I'm working on. And this person was shocked. I said, I love to thrift. I love it. And she was like, oh my God, you're not going to do that with me, are you? And I was like, yes, I absolutely am. And she's like, why? I'm giving you this budget. And I said, well, I can still fill up. I can, you know, max out the budget, but I choose to be conscientious. Because when we're constantly in this cycle of buying new things all the time, the supply and demand is real. The more we buy, the more we consume, the more output there's going to be. And it's this cyclical, it's this cycle that never ends. And so, you know, I've chosen in my work, like I have something thrifted in pretty much every photo shoot I've ever done. That's whether beautiful. It's published, whether it's, you know, and it's less so now because vintage is cool, you know, thrifted is cool. But for a long time, there was a stigma. Yes. Do you feel the shift, or do you feel like you have to kind of fight that?
There is definitely a shift.
Yeah.
I do find, unfortunately, I think, a harder time with people of color in some aspects, but I understand that because the stigma that has been attached to it so long, they try to stay away from anything that kind of makes them appear poor,
what could be perceived as less than.
Yes. So they tend to stay away from that as much as possible, but there has definitely been a shift. You know, people are saying thrifting is getting gentrified. But at the same time,
we need to speak on that too.
Yeah, we can definitely speak on it. But
might be a whole other show.
I'm like, at the same time, there is a massive amount of clothes out there, and there's like literally enough clothes to go around for everybody.
Yeah, several times over.
Quite, yeah.
You know, our producer Gylan introduced me to an artist, amazing artist named Naomi Wanjiku from Kenya. Brilliant, beautiful.
She's the one that's making the
yes, oh God, yes. She was at the art exhibit. Okay. So she and I had a conversation once about even with certain charities or nonprofit organizations that, you know, sell clothes at a retail outlet, how they get these massive write-offs, these tax write-offs, and they ship all of these clothes to Africa. Yeah. Now, the layperson, even myself, before having this conversation, I'm like, well, that's a good thing because we have an excess, we have surplus clothing. So if there are people in other parts of the world that need it, perfect. But what she explained to me, I had never thought of before. She goes, but what happens is we overconsume. We have too much of everything. Yeah. They get shipped to other parts of the world. Then what happens to the local dressmaker in Kenya? Whose services are no longer needed because there are literally truckloads and boatloads of our surplus. That's not really surplus. It's just like it's gluttonous being shipped over there. So then you have local communities and businesses that are affected when we think we're being good Samaritans by buying. So it's like clothing that is made with cheap labor and disenfranchising a group, shipped to us. We wear it for a hot second, whatever, we get tired of it, goes to a thrift store, thrift outlet, whatever, doesn't sell. And so it's all creating, I mean, even the energy it takes to ship these things back. And we really are so very interconnected, and our choices matter.
Yeah. And I'm like, and just to add on to that, Ghana is a huge place where a lot of these things are getting shipped, and they're getting shipped in these bales.
Yes.
And you know, their excuse and reasoning is like, well, you know, we're giving a chance for entrepreneurial stuff for these other countries. But what happens is they buy these bales and they get loans for these bales, not knowing what's in them.
Right.
They having to pay for them, and then like literally opening them up, and it's junk. And it's dirty and it's gross. And, you know, some people are able to then like upcycle and create different things with them. But there's no guarantee that they're going to be able to make that money back. And some of them are losing out. And I'm like, so we're just ruining so much economically, like the local business the makers, the dressmakers, all that stuff. And then as well, these people who are then trying to create a business opportunity from these clothes and messing them up too.
Yeah. And the amount that goes into the landfills. So what tips would you give? Because I know for a lot of people, the idea of ethical fashion, the idea of sustainable fashion, it's very unattainable.
Yes.
And it's almost like this lofty ideal that you can only really afford to do if you've got a lot of money, and then you just do it as a hobby. Or what would you suggest for like the newbie, the person that's like, okay, I don't know what steps would you advise them to take in inventorying their own life? Where do you recommend they start?
I always recommend like a pause in shopping first. Like, wear what you have. Focus on what you have. Like, I think the most sustainable clothes are the ones that are already in your closet. Mm-hmm. So I always say that that's like your first step, is just to stop buying clothes. Just pause for a little bit.
Pause and breathe. It'll be okay.
If you can do it 30 days, do it 30 days. Some people, you know, do 90 days or a whole year. But I find you'll be surprised at how much money you save when you like stop buying things, because, one person had said some sustainable fashion things are too expensive, but we're like, if you buy 10 things at like, $10-$20 versus like 2 things at that $200, I'm like, it's not really as expensive as you think.
It actually then becomes like an investment.
And it's an investment.
Not an expense.
The clothes are going to last you longer. They're investment pieces.
Yeah.
And so, but my first thing, of course, is just to pause, just to wear what you have. And then my second step is always to shop secondhand after that. Try to go with that. After that, you want to shop sustainable brands, preferably small ones. Yes. Shopping small and local is really important. And then after that, if you just cannot, do that.
You're like, I need a hit.
Buy something made to last.
Yes.
Like, invest in your pieces, even so maybe it wasn't quite made as ethically as we would like, but if it's something that's going to last you a good 5-10 years.
And you don't have to buy it 10 times over and replace it. Yeah. So this is going to be a touchy subject, because right now, and I won't say any of the brand names, but we all know who they are. There are several like juggernaut companies that are like almost, you feel like it's unstoppable, fast fashion houses, brands that have saturated the market. Yes. And it's very tempting, because on one hand, people are getting this aspirational fashion. Like, they may see something from Jean Paul Gaultier that you can't afford, but then you see Hien, make a copy.
Yes.
And you're like, oh my God, that's $26. I can afford it. Yeah. And it's purposely designed that way. So many of these companies actually steal and knock off designers. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. There's several young designers, young Black women specifically, whose work has been outright stolen by these fast fashion companies. Yeah. And because they're selling like 1 billion units a month I mean, the numbers are astronomical.
They are ridiculous.
So you have these, it's like a behemoth, and then you have this small person, this maker, not a small person, but a small production.
Yeah.
And they can't fight, you know, to lawyer up and try to, so they end up having to just kind of eat it.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important conversation to have too. It's not just about underpaying the workers, but it's also like they're stealing.
They're stealing. And I'm like, and fashion is such a tricky thing that you can't really copyright it. And even if they try to fight it, they don't necessarily have a claim because of the way fashion works and operates.
Yes.
And it's this gross practice that these companies do, and they can do because of, you know, how much money that they have under their belts. And honestly, I always think, I don't know what I can say to somebody to be like, don't buy that. Like, I don't know. I don't know what that argument is, because.
What do you think about the approach that everyone should just research who they're It's not so much don't buy it, because people are going to do what they want to do, right? Mm-hmm. Like, people are going to be like, I want it, I need it, I got to have it.
Yeah.
Here's my cash or my card, swipe it, whatever. But I feel like encouraging people to just do research. We live in like a very like immediate like microwave society where it's like, gimme, now. So you're on Instagram and you're scrolling and it's like, ooh, that dress is cute. You can order it like in the app. It's at your house in 2 days, you know?
Yeah.
But maybe pause. Maybe pause is the theme. Pause. Google the company. See, like information is so abundant.
It is.
So maybe just research. Maybe it's not so much don't buy it, because if you tell people don't do something, they're gonna do it.
They're absolutely
it's like talking to a teenager.
Like, even when you tell them that people are literally dying to make your clothes, they're like, there's like 100 excuses in the book, and it's like I don't know how to say that, you know, your right to have fancy trendy clothes shouldn't be worth more than somebody's life. Yeah. So I'm like, I feel like that's been said, and so I don't know how else to you can't tell people
how to touch someone.
You can't. Yeah.
I remember sharing, well, you're in this group, but in a group that we're both in, a shopping group. I remember sharing the story about the triangle shirtwaist fire in 1931, when the International League of Women Garment Workers was formed. And this was like, this is 2022, so this was
almost 100 years ago.
Yeah. And people were mortified that this thing happened kind of in antiquity, and these women were trapped and lost their lives. And that's history, but it's a continuum, like it's still happening. But because of social media, because of media cycles in general, like everything is old news.
It is.
So things that happen, you know, you could share a story on social media and they're like, that's old. And it's like, it happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I do think social media and just media in general proliferates the idea that everything's history. And it's like, no, everything is happening right now. And that's a challenge. So you decided to combat all of that by founding the Ethical Network. So explain to our viewers, what is the Ethical Network? What is your mission?
Yeah, so our mission is ultimately just to bring individuals and businesses together that have sustainable concepts and ethical business practices at the core of their foundation, to bring them together, to educate these businesses on how to grow and to see them thrive, as well as educating the community about what sustainable and ethical businesses look like. And the whole idea is just to bring people together, get resources, build community, have support. Like, we just want to see people make it. And like we were talking earlier, I'm like, we just want to come together and come up together, because it can be so hard just having a business, but then having sustainability or ethical business practices,
it's like adding these other layers,
these things to it.
Yes.
Yeah, it can be. It's hard. It's hard. Like I written an article for Katie's magazine, ESJ, formerly known as Ethical Style Journal. You guys can go check it out.
Yes.
But it was just about like the cost of sustainable fashion, why it costs so much. And one of the big things is just a lack of resources. So, you know, I talk about like organic cotton is one thing. Like, there is so much cotton being produced through the world. Organic cotton is like less than 1% of that cotton.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's going to cost more.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, that's just part of that thing. But if we can come together, if we can support these small and what I call micro businesses, we can help them grow and help them come up with that foundation of sustainability at their core. Whereas these larger corporations are basically just trying to add that on while they still, you know, pump out billions of pieces of clothing.
Right, right. They're like, look, we have an offering over here for you. But then there's like this whole mountain, literally and figuratively mountains of, you know.
Here's this one garment out of the thousands that we make that is made out of organic cotton.
Right. Put that on the landing page. Yeah. So originally you all started out with 5 founding members. Do you all, but now there's 3 of you?
There's actually just me now. It's just me.
You are running with the torch.
I have run with the torch. We have like a whole new board. There's 5 members on our board. We actually just brought in a 6th member.
Okay.
Right? 6, yeah. But yeah, it's just me now from that original 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you are, as they would say in the culture, about it.
Yes.
Like,
look, I am that person that I'm like, if you can dream it, like we can make it happen.
Yes.
Like I am, you tell me what you need, we're going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Like I'm all about supporting these people's dreams. And I think that is a huge reason why Ethical Network just works so well for me and why I love it so much, because I'm like, if you want it, I'll get it for you.
Yeah.
Like I'm all about making sure you can get what you want. And I love like rooting for people and encouraging them and making sure they have everything that they need. So, yeah.
And I know you've done events like bringing those vendors, not just like in concept, like, oh, here's their social media or here's their, no, you literally physically bring people together and have like vendors or brainstorming sessions, or you also have a podcast yourself. Will you share the name of your podcast with us?
The podcast is called Unpacking Ethical with me and Katie that I was talking from Ethical Style Journal. We are the co-host of that podcast where we break down different things about ethical and sustainable living. It's been a lot of fun. We're on season 2, just released the 3rd episode will come out for season 2 will come out tomorrow.
Okay. So. And are you on, is it like a Facebook Live? Is it like YouTube? Is it?
So we have
Spotify?
We're on YouTube.
Okay.
We aren't on YouTube, on the Ethical Network's YouTube channel.
Okay.
And then if you, I think technically we're pretty much on any podcast platform that you can find if you just like search Unpacking Ethical.
Okay.
We're in there. We're in there.
Gotcha. It just like sends it out to all of the, gotcha. Okay. So I have so many questions, and this is always a struggle for me because
I'm like, ooh, I didn't get all the wiggles out.
Yeah, no, wiggle, get it out. Okay, good. Our producer didn't see that. No, seriously, sometimes you just have to like shake it out, and it's fine. But no, I'm like, I have so many questions. My brain is like pinging. So where do you see Ethical Network? Like, what is your dream for it? Like, say 10 years from now, what do you want to see? Like, if you could build it out, like your dream organization, what does that look like? How is it functioning and existing in the future?
Well, what I see is like a co-op. I see a co-op. There's so many things that I see. I'm like, I'm constantly having to like rein myself in.
Right. Because you're excited about it.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I see a co-op with a place where vendors can sell their stuff, and a store. I love the idea of being downtown with tourists that can shop these local businesses.
Yeah.
Having an event space within that. And when I say a co-op, like we have like the store and this place for the vendors, but I also would love to see a space where people can, I guess, just purchase or like use stuff. I'm like thinking like sewing machines and dyeing vats and like metal working things, or, you know, stuff to make. We have a lot of skincare groups, you know, just stuff to get those ingredients and work them and use them and figure out what that looks like. I would just love for people to like try their hands, like even if it's just like a DIY kind of thing, and even bring in these vendors to like teach people how to do different things, and while buying, you know, because it's fun to make things 1 time or 2 times, but, you know, here's a person you can actually buy this from if this is a little much for you.
Well, and I think people find very quickly being a maker is not easy. And it's not, people do it as a hobby. There are hobbyists, but when you're a business person, when you're an entrepreneur and you are a maker, that is an intense amount of effort and energy. And I like that you said people can come and do like DIY, because then there's an appreciation level that wasn't there before. When you know how much work goes into, like, I love to cook, but I've been to certain restaurants where I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to pay for this food, even though I can make it at home, but I don't want to spend 7 hours preparing like this 4-course dinner with all these layers of spices and infusions. And I'm like making these sculptural, I just want to eat it.
Right.
So let me find someone. I just want to eat it. Do you remember that commercial? Well, you're younger than me. I've got you by some years, but there was a commercial like growing up in the like early 90s. There was this cute little black boy, and I think it was for Mrs. Baird's bread. And all of these kids are talking about how, like, what kind of sandwiches they like, and they like peanut butter and jelly. And this cute little boy comes on and he's like, I just want to eat the bread. And that is kind of the way a lot of people are. Like, they just want the product. But if you educate them on what it takes to make the product, what it costs in energy and in time to bring it to fruition, it's like, okay, I just want to eat the bread, but I'm really willing to pay. Yeah. And I'm willing to honor that person's effort.
And their artistry. Because there's just a certain artistry in making these things. I'm always amazed. I just bought caramel soaps. Hey, shout out to Tara. Some body butter. And this is something I make on my own usually. Right. But every once in a while, I just need to buy somebody else's, because I'm like, y'all do it so much better than me. Right. And I don't know what you're doing, but it just works. And I need that in my life.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just the person's like, I don't know. I'm a firm believer in like, a person's energy gets transferred into what they're creating. So I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but like sometimes you purchase something from someone and maybe their energy's a little off and you just don't enjoy the product as much because that energy or the memory is associated, that experience is associated with it. But if someone is like lovely and kind and engaging and really appreciative, your experience using that product is informed by that transaction. Yes. It's interesting how that...
You're saying that. And I'm like, I'm looking at my bracelets because...
Yes. Tell us about your bracelets.
So these, oh my gosh, Tracy's, I don't remember, Tracy Collins.
Is she local?
She's local.
Okay.
So it's funny because I just bought a necklace from her actually as well. But I've always loved these like chakra beads and the lava little things. And I think every time I go to her booth, I buy another one of these things. Because I'm like, there's just something about her stuff. And I'm just like, I just want whatever that is just on me.
Yeah.
Like at all times.
Yeah.
Because I've been...
Because her energy is attached to it. Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a question for you. Because people always ask me this. And sometimes I'm like, I'm tired of answering this question. And then sometimes it really makes me laugh. Do you think like thrifted clothing can be haunted?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I've never thought about that, but I would not doubt it. I would not doubt it. This is why y'all, when y'all take your stuff to the thrift store, please wash it.
And also when you're purchasing it, like wash it. Like don't go to a thrift store or to even a consign, even if it's a high end. I mean, when I was in LA the last time, I went to this really beautiful I'm not going to give them advertisement, but really beautiful high-end store. And everything was like in the upper hundreds to thousands, right? And because it's LA, you know, they can do that. It wouldn't do well here, but it does really well there. But everything wasn't properly cleaned. Like I noticed it as I was just shopping. They skipped that step. And I think people, because of the setting of the building and the wooden hangers and the shishi vibe, I feel like people just buy that stuff and put it on their body. And I'm like, you can't. There's a process. Yeah. You need to launder your things, take them to the dry cleaner. Yes. But, so I've gotten in the practice, I'm going to sound crazy, but I've gotten in the practice of like saging certain things. Because I do believe,
do what you got to do.
Like if you go to an estate sale and you know that person died. Yeah. And you don't, I'm like, yeah, let me just bless this. But I was just curious because I do know some people who they're just like, everything's haunted. So I have and I was just curious what your thoughts. Yeah. Because people ask me that, aren't you afraid to wear it? And I'm like, no, it's fine.
I don't know why a lot of things just don't come to my mind until somebody says something. But
That's not been one of those thoughts.
That has not been one of my thoughts, but it's not something that I'm like going to refute. Like, absolutely not. I'm like, there is a possibility.
Anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
Yeah. So do you think that there will ever be a time where the typical retail storefront and the thrift or consignment representation will be equal? Do you feel like we'll ever get to that point, like as the human animals we are?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Secondhand is coming up a lot.
Yeah.
It's been a huge increase, and they're like projecting it to be like a $30 billion business.
Yes. I've seen those numbers. That's kind of what spurred on my question.
Yeah. So it is swiftly growing, and it's going to be huge. But I don't know. I feel like within like the next 5-10 years or so, we're going to see a huge...
It's like a pendulum swing.
Yeah, we're going to definitely see that just because things are happening. People were losing resources. And, you know, we're just not going to be able to buy and consume, I think, what we are used to. I think we're reaching a tipping point there. And so I think I don't know if it'll be in my lifetime, but I think maybe we'll get to that point if the world hasn't completely fallen apart.
Right.
Like,
if we're not like...
Not to be pessimistic.
No, not to be macabre. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah.
But it's something to think about. Like, how long can we sustain this pace?
Yeah.
This momentum? And I think... It's not about what I think, but I think universal law is that balance is always sought within the order of things. Yeah. And so right now things are very imbalanced. But so I want to talk to you about the growth of sustainable fashion and ethical fashion. You mentioned something earlier. You alluded to the gentrification of it. And I really want to talk about that because nobody wants to. It's an awkward conversation. It makes people uncomfortable, and a lot of people get defensive. But you and I share a commonality in our culture, and we know that a lot of times in our communities, it was a necessity.
Yes.
And because we are the inventive, creative, brilliant people that we are alchemists. So we took things that were cast aside historically, everything from institutions to ideas to tangible goods, and we made it something new and made it something beautiful. Yes. That is something to honor.
Yes.
Not everyone appreciates that part of it. And I do see a growing ideology that even like coveted vintage pieces, not everyone's deserving, right? Like, or not everyone needs to have access to this. And you're seeing certain things being really priced out. How do you feel about all of that? Like, how do you feel? Yeah. I struggle. I do struggle with it. I don't want to say I'm like anti-capitalist because I literally we're all capitalists.
I literally run a network of small businesses.
Right. So that would be a conflict of interest,
right? But I always tell people I'm like playing two sides of the rope here, right?
Yeah.
Because I do think capitalism is a huge part of our issues. It's, you know, it's that love of money, it's the greed.
Right.
But I feel like there's a way to approach it that's better.
Absolutely.
Maybe not completely reversing, but we can be better about how we go about this, right?
Yeah.
And I don't even remember where I was going with that.
It's okay. Well, it's like while you think about where you were going, I always equate it to because I love chocolate. Right. So it's like chocolate cake. Yes, it's good, but do you need to eat it every day for breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert plus? You are going to get ill. You're going to become ill. So it's like capitalism is inherently... at one time our ancestors were capital, so that's a whole other conversation, a tangentially related conversation. But capitalism is inherently flawed, but that doesn't mean that it cannot be made better.
Right.
And there's this kind of space where people are like, well, this is what it is. So we just have to accept it. And we don't. No. We don't really have to accept. Like, we have the ability and the power to change things. Mm-hmm. And I think you're a prime example. Like, you're just like, well, I'm going to start with me. And this is what I love. So I'm going to do something with it.
And I think that's the important part. And I think what I want people to get out of the whole sustainability conversation is all you're doing is starting with your little corner of the world. I don't need you to change the whole world. Right. If everybody just does their own little corner, that's, you know, how many? 8 billion corners.
8 billion corners.
So, yeah, just focus on your little corner.
You know, like, every guest I've had so far is like so brilliant. And I feel like, Gylan, we may have to think about that. I feel like every guest says something and I'm like, oh my goodness, put it on a t-shirt. But that's my capitalistic mind, right? That's how deep down it's so deeply ingrained. I'm like, 8 billion corners. That's like a catchy, and that could start a conversation. It's like, but do we need to put it on a t-shirt? Because then we have to like hire someone to make the t-shirts. And
look, I got you all your resources. We're going to make it sustainable. We're going to make sure
but 8 billion
people are
corners,
getting paid fairly to make
I like that you said that because it's so easy to become overwhelmed and you're like, well, crap, I just can't do anything. I'm just not going to do it because it's just too much. Yeah. But I like to use the, you know, I'm a type A personality, no secret. And it's easy for me to get overwhelmed if things are not perfect. So one of my like spiritual mentors said to me, and then when I was a little girl, my grandmother said a variation of the same thing. How do you eat an elephant? Which I don't advocate because I don't eat meat. Don't actually eat the elephant. This is a metaphor, right? But it's like, how do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite. Mm-hmm. That's all that you can do. Mm-hmm. It's colossal. It's overwhelming. You just have to. Now I feel really weird saying it though, because I don't advocate eating.
We're going to ask y'all, how do you eat trees?
How do you eat the
redwood tree?
Look, how do you eat the jackfruit? Bite by bite. But it's true. Anything that is overwhelming. But we live in a culture where we're inundated with so much information. Yes. It's like too much. Mm-hmm. And, you know, life is not easy. It's stressful. So you can very easily just tap out. But 8 billion corners is such like I really like that. I like that you said that. That's good. I'm going to incorporate that into my lexicon.
I feel like I need to like copyright that now.
No, I'm serious. Like, okay,
no.
Mr. Producer, redact it. No.
Your t-shirt would probably be better.
No, well, it's so funny because I'm always telling people like, oh, that's a great idea. You should do it. But then I don't. I'm just like, I recognize something that's valuable, but I'm not going to do anything with it. Like, I want you to do something with it because I'm not interested in
you know what?
Making any more businesses.
I was just having this conversation with my mom because I was talking about spare parts. I'm going to shout out all my businesses today, okay?
Do it. This is why you're here. Let's talk about spare parts.
Spare parts. So actually, this little skirt that I literally just like
with
created
the sexy slit
I literally created this morning. I just like sewed this thing this morning.
I love it.
It came from fabric that I purchased at Spare Parts, this little thing. So Spare Parts is a creative reuse center. It's basically like a thrift shop, secondhand shop for arts and craft stuff. But I'm constantly like in there just like picking up stuff because you see stuff and you're like, I can do something with that.
Right.
I can do something with that. And I'm like, I was telling my mom, I'm like, I have like a room full of stuff from Spare Parts that I'm not doing
I have my own spare parts. Yeah.
I'm not doing anything with, but I just see it and I'm like, I need that.
Yeah. But the fact that it's available there and it's a resource and it kind of helps reshape people's reality and idea that these spare things are not trash. Yeah. Like, not everything needs to go into the landfill. Like, take something. And you know who I have to shout out? Do you know Agosto Cuellar?
Yes.
I am going to take a moment to shout out Agosto.
Please.
Agosto saved my life because when I first moved back to San Antonio, I was depressed because I didn't want to be here. Sorry, I didn't. I've grown to appreciate it. But I kind of hated it, and I was like, ugh. So I remember walking down South Alamo. Before it was, like, cute and safe. Everybody's like, you're going downtown. Ooh, you're going to get mugged. And I'm like, I'm exploring the city. And I remember happening upon this store called Jive. It was Jive Refried at the time. And it was on South Alamo right across from, not too far from, like, Rosario's. And I remember walking in and I see this store and it's just full of like every sort of amazing thing you can find, like ponchos from Oaxaca, and then there were like ball gowns from like the 1930s, but then there's like bullet shell casing things that he's like making earrings out of. I still have the earrings, Augusto, thank you. But he's such a resourceful person and he's such a gem in this community, and his career, his creative career has really been like upcycling. And that is design. I think sometimes people want to like trivialize that process, but to look at something that's considered like refuse or trash, or it's inherently beautiful to take something and make something new.
And I can only imagine what his shop looked like back then, because it is like a whole vibe now.
It was amazing, but he's since opened, he has Augustine now.
Yes, and oh my God, that store, oh Jesus.
Yeah.
I like just walking in there, I'm like, stuff everywhere, and like so artfully, like
it's
put
curated.
Together.
It's not just a whole bunch of junk.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Yeah. I still remember the first time I walked in there, and it's a whole
like,
vibe.
Yeah.
It's a whole vibe.
Absolutely.
I was like, I could just...
But to tie that connective tissue is that a place like Spare Parts can give birth to a place like Augustine or circa 2009, whatever, Jivery Fries. So shout out to Augusto Cuellar. Like, we all love you. He's an amazing member of this community. And, you know, you don't have to set out to change the entire world. Like you were saying, you can just say, you know what? I'm going to pause. I'm going to see what I have. I'm going to use what I have. I'm going to do research. I'm going to be mindful. I think the mindfulness part is just be mindful. Like, think about your purchasing patterns. Think about your purchasing power, because it is power.
It is.
That's why everybody's like trying to get our attention, you know, constantly, like marketing, like it's power.
Yeah.
So you can shift things with how you spend your money and who you spend it with.
And I know a very popular saying is vote with your wallet. And I'm still trying to decide how I feel about that. But
another show.
But there is that you vote with your wallet, right?
Absolutely.
You basically saying you're, you know, putting your money into the type of world that you want to see.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a reality. Yeah. So I want to go back to, because I'm really fascinated by the idea of you being, you know, an academic, being a scientist, being, you know, a brilliant woman in aspect. In one, we have 5 minutes. Okay, darn, I have 10,000 more questions. Okay, so then I won't ask you all the questions I was about to. But what is your advice for a young woman who may look like you, who thinks she has to choose?
Choose
between one, you know, the idea that my parents want me to go to law school and that's what I have to do forever and ever, amen, and that's all I can do. Or I'm supposed to be a doctor and that's all I can do all forever and ever, amen. Or I'm supposed to be an architect. You know, I'm going to shout out someone else actually to give you time to think about this, but there's another member of our community. Her name is Tamara Adira, and she's a world-renowned flamenco dancer. She's an architect as well. She went to MIT. And I think the idea that you can't have these multiplicities inside of you is like, it's just some bull. But what would you say? Because I think in our communities, there is an idea because of the uncertainty that, baby, just get that stability, focus on this and you'll be fine. You don't have to choose though.
No, I think that's what I was going to say. You can have both. You can have it all. Like, you can embrace all these parts of you. Absolutely. I think even as I was doing the science thing, I was still drawing. I was still making clothes. I was still upcycling, even if it wasn't necessarily in an entrepreneurial sense.
Right.
I was still doing it. And I think you can have these things. And I think you have to. I think it's absolutely imperative, essential, just like whatever word you want to use, you have to. Because I feel like denying any small part of yourself is going to bring disaster and chaos and kind of release you from that balance that you have within yourself.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important not just to think that you can have both or have all those sides, but you absolutely have to embrace all that and continue.
It's not an option.
It's not.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, since we've been informed that I got the 5 fingers, so that means, now we probably have 3 minutes. So once again, for our audience, please let us know where we can find you, how we can support you, your socials. When people say, "Ooh, I want to see more of what she's doing," where do we find you?
Ooh. It's like, where can't you find me?
I know, you're like, I'm global.
All over the place, y'all. Google. No. Definitely check out the Ethical Network. Check us out. Go to our website. You can find us. We have our website, ethicalnetworksa.org. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn. Is that it? I think that's it. YouTube. Okay. Check out our YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our podcast, Unpacking Ethical. Yes. We're on YouTube, and it's technically on Anchor, but it goes out to like the world.
Right.
And you can specifically get in on our website at the ethicalnetworksa.org/podcast.
Okay.
Keep that simple.
Got it. And then Blessed Designs. Yeah.
So I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well. It's blesseddesignsco.com. I was like, what is that website? So you can do that. You can follow me on those channels as well. I'm on TikTok. I'm not good at it, y'all.
It's okay. It's okay though. But it doesn't have to be perfection. But you're doing it.
I'm doing it.
And that's a message too. You're doing it.
I am doing it.
Even if it's not perfect, you're doing it.
So I've gotten really good at that. When people were just like, put it out there. I'm like, I'm putting it out there. It may not be interesting, but it's out there.
Right.
So, but our podcast is interesting.
Yeah.
If I do say so myself.
Yeah.
So
and I believe you, and I'm going to tune in. I'm glad. I just learned today that you had a podcast. So we will, the VodPod Media team and More Than Magic will be checking you out. Yay. So awesome. Thank you so much, Sharmon. This was delightful. You are delightful. I already know that some little girl somewhere is like, oh, I can do all the things. So thank you for being inspiring.
Well, looking like a little girl too. So.
Yeah. Well, no, you do. So she's going to be like, oh, she's 5 years older than me. I want to play date with her. And on that
I'm going to just put it out there, y'all. I am 41, y'all.
And that is why this show is called More Than Magic, because that's another kind of magic. We'll talk about that. I want to do a beauty show one day. And but anyway, so thank you again for being here. Again, you all, if you have been watching, please like the show. Please subscribe. Please share. Please do all the things. We really appreciate your support. And we're going to be bringing you more in the future. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
I do.